Hey, welcome to this podcast, and we've got somebody that is a treat, and he represents a treat, and that is Kyle Mann, who is chief editor of the Babylon Bee. And if you've not heard of the Babylon Bee, we don't know where you've been. You don't know where you've been, because this is the cutting edge, I think, comfort dose for what's going on in our world today. They have an incredible ability to not only make you laugh and to make you think, but to challenge your worldview position. And then on top of the fact, and we'll talk about it soon, how they can be so prescient in what they say, because what they write about will come to pass. And so, Kyle, I've got to ask you something right now. It says here that you used to be in sales at the Western Water Works Supply Company, and now that you're editor-in-chief of Babylon Bee. Is that true, or is this a Babylon Bee?
It is absolutely true, yeah. I was in construction sales for 11 years before I started writing comedy for a living, which is the most bizarre jump. You know, people always assume that, like, I started out, you know, people who write start out as assistant editors or
Sure.
kind of freelance writing before they get into, you know, a more prominent role like the editor-in-chief of a satire site. But it was a bit of a journey. I always enjoyed comedy. I always enjoyed satire. I was in various different church environments over the years, so, you know, you're kind of absorbing it all. And, you know, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but comedy and satire is such a good coping mechanism, and anyone who's been bashing their head against a keyboard at a sales job all day, you know, knows that you need to retain that sense of humor. So it's kind of a good path when you think about it, you know, that we were using humor to kind of rally the troops and be able to do a 9-to-5 office job day to day. And the Babylon Bee launched in March 2016. I sent in a joke. It was Holy Spirit unable to move through congregation as fog machine breaks, and that was our first. That was our first big viral hit. And so the owner of the site said, "Do you want to write? Do you want to be the head writer?" And I started doing it. And 2 years later, I got hired full time as the editor-in-chief and made that career jump.
Incredible. I love it. I love the fact, and it is a fact, that you mention that humor and satire is it's part of our human function, right? When things are rough and difficult, which is rather interesting, because I've been to other parts of the world where there's cultures where you're actually not really allowed to laugh, and they actually don't even want to laugh. I won't name those countries because I have friends there, but as an American, and I'm not saying as an American red, white, and blue, I'm talking about as an American the way that we're brought up, we often cope with difficult situations not in a disrespectful way by making something funny. It's actually some form of our ability to survive a challenging event or a bad time. And so for you guys, it's been amazing, because the more pronounced or demonstrative, I'm thinking like the Trump era, you guys were so incredibly effective and funny. And now we're in the dark days of Obama or Biden or whoever it is. And it even adds more to your list of, well, because we want to laugh. We need to laugh now.
Yeah, humor is such a great, you know, humor has so many functions. You know, there's a prophetic role that it plays in proclaiming truth. And there is a comfort element to it, you know. We get people that write in and say that they're going through the hardest season in their lives, you know, whether that's the death of a friend or family member, or, you know, just financial struggles or whatever it is. And they say that the only way that they're able to really consume the news is through the Babylon Bee, because they're able to learn about what's going on in the outside world, but through the satirical lens that helps make them know, like, hey, it's going to be okay. It's not the end of the world. We know who's in control of history, so we don't have to worry about, you know, this or that little event. Right. When you joke about events, you really give them less power over us.
I love it. That's so true. So true. You guys, if I remember right, didn't I see you guys on Tucker, for example, on the Tucker Carlson show?
Yeah,
I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, and you think about that, like how crazy that is, that Christian news satire site, launched
Right.
six years ago, having this broad cultural impact through things like Tucker Carlson becoming an ally of us, and we're finding these allies out in the world that maybe some of them aren't necessarily allies in faith, or maybe they're not our brothers
Correct.
and sisters in Christ, but are actually allies in this culture war. They stand side by side with us in certain
Yeah.
issues, defending free speech or whatnot. That's crazy to me. I mean, that we feel humbled and honored and totally not worthy of
Well,
that kind of
but
impact.
you should, and I love that because God is using your platform so uniquely. And I mean, let's be honest. I personally, I don't think that Satan's got a funny bone in his body. Having said that, I believe God invented humor, and when we see what you guys are able to communicate to an audience, that the church, no evangelist, no pastor, no priest or pope, is going to get to the audience that you guys are reaching. And you guys are also, what I believe, is almost, you test the culture, and you not only test the culture, you test the person that is consuming your product, for the lack of a better term. When somebody reads something at Babylon Bee that I think is extremely funny, because first of all, I have no problem laughing at myself, or what you guys just pointed out is so incredibly true. When I see the person next to me look at it and say, "Oh, that's despicable," it tells me so much about them, that there's something broken in them because they can't laugh at that.
Yeah, we find that when someone gets very offended by satire, now I'm not saying that there's not a line that people can't cross. Like, obviously there's humor that's God honoring and there's humor that's not God honoring, and you have to be careful of that. But at the same time, when someone reads a satirical piece or watches a funny video or whatever, and they get offended, it often says more about the person
Exactly.
than it does about the comedy. I think we consume a lot of comedy that comes from the secular world,
Right.
and most of the time, if there's a joke about Christians or the church, I can laugh at it and go, yeah, that's kind of true,
Exactly.
without getting super offended or trying to cancel that person or trying to burn that comedian's whole career down or whatever.
Right.
Which is not what you see on the left.
Right.
It's funny. The stereotype of Christians is that we're the kind of 1950s fuddy-duddies that can't laugh at anything. We're the guys who are sitting in the corner at the party and like, oh, you guys
Yeah.
are having too much fun. And
Shame.
yeah. And now it seems to me that the secular left has become so zealously religious about their beliefs, so blindly religious, that they're now the ones who take themselves so
Very
seriously.
stoic.
Well, that makes
Depressed.
it makes a great target for a joke. Like that's why Hollywood's beat Christians up for 5 decades.
That is true.
Because we were so serious. Now it's like it feels like the church has lightened up and been able to laugh at it. We've been the butt of so many jokes. We're able to laugh at ourselves.
Good point.
The left wants to tear you down when you make fun of them, as we've seen it.
Yeah,
at the
and they
Babylon
don't
Bee.
know what to do with you guys.
Right.
They really don't. I don't know who it is. Maybe you know, but some famous memer out there said that progressives or leftists can't meme.
Yeah.
And it's so true, because you've got to be able to see things in life in such a way. The congregation that I pastor over, they know me, and I disclose it to them that that for me, I see things in cartoon fashion, and for me, people think I have a profound memory. I don't. It's just that what I see everything very technicolor, and I see things almost with captions over people's heads. And for that, I'm able to remember a situation or somebody that I've met or their name. But in many ways, it enables me to cope with what's going on. As a pastor, I'm not a remote pastor. I'm here hands-on. I meet with people who are dying, or their child has just been told that there's some gender type, whatever, and the parents are coping. And for me to be able to deal with that, I've got to be able to see this situation in an area of hope. And a lot of people don't equate humor with hope, but there's a great connection.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, G.K. Chesterton wrote a famous essay, famous for G.K. Chesterton.
Exactly.
Anyway, it was called I think it's called On Chasing After One's Hat, or On Running After One's Hat. And he made this point that when you face some hardship in your life, whether it's large or small, and he uses the example of a distinguished gentleman whose hat blows off his head, and now he's frustrated and his whole day's ruined because he has to chase his hat down and be an idiot, on the street running as everybody's laughing at him.
Looking like a fool.
He looks like a fool, and he says that we should enjoy being the butt of the joke. We should enjoy, see yourself as the star of a sitcom, not the star of this great drama, and you'll enjoy your life. You'll be much more content.
Why can't we, Kyle, enjoy humor at our expense? What's wrong with us? Look, I'm old enough to be your dad. I remember in America that laughed at itself. I grew up in an era where when we did something, it could be laughed at and made fun of. There was something in my day when I was a kid that it was like the Dean Martin roast. You can watch them maybe on YouTube. Bing Crosby, Bob Hope. I mean, they're ripping into these guys that are on the platform, and they're all laughing. I mean, somebody's making fun of Ronald Reagan, the president or the governor at the time, and people are laughing, including Reagan. And now you'll get sued for that kind of stuff. What's happened?
Yeah, it feels to me like the power of comedy is a uniting power, right? That when you do find normal people, whether on the left or the right, and there are some people on the left who are kind of at least normal, or at least, as the Overton window shifts. Fewer numbers. Well, as the Overton window shifts, you still have some people that are kind of finding themselves left behind by the Democratic Party as it goes crazier and crazier. But when you can find that common ground, that's what humor helps us do, is it helps us to all kind of come together and laugh at each other. And growing up with groups of friends, you'd make fun of each other for this or that. And you never saw it as, oh, this guy said this, cancel him, don't.
You never cried about it.
You never cried about it. And I mean, I think the other side of it, like I was saying before, the secular left takes themselves so seriously that they can't laugh at themselves. And that's just a difference in worldview. Because what they see is that their political beliefs are salvation, right? Because they don't have an idea of God. They don't have an idea that there's a hope in the future, and all this political stuff that we're fighting over. While there's important battles, Christ reigns over history. We're going to get there. We know the end. Right. We know the end of the story.
We read the book.
We can laugh about it. The ins and outs of what's going on. Whereas if they think that their political philosophy will bring heaven on earth, will bring salvation to mankind, then if you were laughing at it, it's like laughing at their religion.
Yeah, exactly. And you're so scoffing and mocking them, and
they
can't cope with that.
Right.
They can't cope with that. Do you guys have like an arch enemy, number one type of is it a group or is it a person that just can't handle you guys? They actually maybe even campaign against you somehow? or is that just the federal government?
Well, yeah, I mean, right now it's a massive alliance against us. Big tech collusion against us. We've had everyone come after us, from CNN to the fact checkers to Twitter to Facebook to the New York Times. We had an ex-CIA agent that was coming after us on Twitter saying that we were far-right disinformation disguised as satire. It's like this.
Wow, that would be brilliant.
I don't know about the whole deep state conspiracy theories or whatever, but it feels like there is this thing, that I don't know if that's a spiritual battle or what that is, but there is this alliance against us, and it is. We are treated completely differently than other, satire sites that are on the left or comedians that are on the left. We get fact-checked constantly, and they'll say that we're...
Help me. We're talking satire here, and yet fact-checked. How does that give me an example. How does that possibly work out? The last thing I'd ever expect is that for the fact-checkers who need fact-checking, are fact-checking you guys?
Yeah, constantly. I think we might have 40 or 50 different joke fact checks out there, and what's concerning about that isn't, it is funny to me. We did a joke saying that Ocasio-Cortez went on The Price is Right and guessed that everything is free, and
that's great.
And there's a fact check of it on Snopes, but to me it makes the joke funnier.
Actually, oh my gosh.
Did you think that actually happened? That was
no, my point is, right. I'm stupefied as to how bad it is that they can't laugh.
Right.
That they
that's funny, right? I mean, regardless of which side you come from,
AOC had to have laughed at that.
Yeah, right. You'd hope so, right?
But to think that somebody got their knickers in a wad over that is both extremely funny and horrifically tragic at the same time.
It's funny because if you Google that joke, the first result is Snopes, and it says, "Did Ocasio-Cortez really go on The Price is Right and guess that everything is free?" false. And then there's a 1,000-word debunking of the article, which
They make you.
it says something about the target of the satire if you can't tell that's false immediately right on its face. But the concerning thing about it, it does make us laugh, but the concerning thing about it is that there's this kind of big tech cabal where if a fact checker labels you as false, now Facebook rates you as an unreliable news source. So now your links start to get suppressed on Facebook. And then Twitter and Facebook are talking, and then they start to suppress you. And we're banned from Twitter right now, too.
So because, okay, I'm trying to follow this. Help me out, because this is not my world. But if they ban you guys or label you guys as disinformation or false information, yet you're a satire organization, a comedic product, that they've actually put you guys in the realm of opposition politically. You are political opposition.
Well, and they don't say that outright.
No, they don't.
What they say is this is a disinformation site, or this site is confusing people, so it's rated down in the metrics or
because
whatever.
It's satire.
Well, yeah, but they don't really kind of acknowledge that it's satire. It's like false, fact check false. They made a false statement. The very first one we did, we had one of our very first fact checks was we said that CNN purchased an industrial washing machine to spin the news in. And
I remember reading that.
Facebook tried to take us off their platform, deplatform us because that was false.
Because CNN didn't really buy a washing machine.
Because they didn't, well, as far as we know, they didn't. That didn't actually happen.
Unbelievable. I'm sorry. I'm stupid now. I'm asking you. Was that a real human that decided that to critique you guys like that? Or are those bots? Or what is that?
So the way that we think it works is that there's a real human at Snopes or the different fact-checking sites who decides we're going to fact-check this one. And then Facebook has an algorithm that feeds any fact-check from Snopes, and it grabs it on their site and says, all right, this one is labeled as false. You get dinged for sharing a false story. And they do that with USA Today. They do that with AP fact-checkers. They do that with Snopes. So we've gotten fact-checked many times on different topics. And so now we have a very low rating in the system. We are a purveyor of false information.
Has it hurt you guys at all? That technology side of it?
Yeah, absolutely. We get completely suppressed on Facebook. Any link you share to babylonb.com, your friends probably won't see. We went from getting, we'd post a joke that would get 50,000 shares, 100,000 shares on Facebook to links that get 10 shares. That's the level of...
And it's so obvious.
And it's quite obvious.
Even in our sermons, I'm not known to be politically correct. And it is, I'll look and see 3 days later where a message will have, normally 100,000, something 200,000 views, and it's got 57,000 or just 10,000. Something's up.
Yeah.
Something's up. But what about, and we're kind of going into areas that are kind of yet maybe not announced or fully announced, but we've been told on our end regarding religious content that there is some sort of hope coming. Part of this Truth Social team, we've heard that there's going to be things coming where we'll be able to actually speak and preach and do what we do uncensored. Have you heard anything about that as well? Is there anything that you might be able to say that there is a fair game coming to town?
Well, I'll say that there is some hope from different angles, and I don't know exactly how everything's gonna shake out in the end, but obviously we have all these alternative social sites that are coming out, and that's a positive thing. It's good to be able to put your content on 20 different platforms instead of just the two big guys.
Yeah, true.
At the same time, a lot of those smaller sites, they're not going to drive the same amount of traffic. You're not going to be reaching the same audience. Right. It kind of puts you in this echo chamber where you're not reaching the people that you're trying to reach. A Babylon Bee article that goes viral on Facebook is going to get us a lot more traffic, a lot more exposure, a lot more Tucker Carlson appearances than something that does well on Parler or on Truth Social or these different sites. Obviously, with things like Elon Musk putting in his offer to buy Twitter, it seems like there is this, even within the big tech companies, there is this pushback. We even saw it with Netflix. That Netflix is telling its employees to, if we're going to make non-woke content, you just have to deal with it or quit.
Yeah.
So you're seeing a lot of these guys that made this bed that they have to lie in now starting to say, wait a minute, we're going to be in trouble. And you saw it with Twitter, with Elon Musk. They're having to clean up their act because they're realizing now that they're doing things that aren't good for business just because they want to push their woke ideology and agendas. So I've been encouraged by some of the developments that we've seen in that area.
Yeah. Something's got to happen.
Something's going to give. I mean,
Something has to.
people are waking up and rebelling against it.
Absolutely. Gosh, I laughed. You guys, something to the effect where Elon Musk was buying Twitter, but he woke up the next morning, there's like 138,000 board member votes that had been counted during the night. And
That's right. Yeah.
you know, that kind of stuff just, you know, everybody who's watching the news from either spectrum has got to just say, oh, that is funny. So your Christmas stuff, what's your favorite? Do you have a genre? Do you have a season? Or for you, is it just each day?
So a lot of our process is definitely like waking up in the morning, looking at the news. How can we make fun of this? You know, and you know, we are there to communicate truth. We are there to you know, deliver a message that we want to deliver. But at the same time, a lot of the problem with a lot of Christian or conservative content in the past has been that they put the message first in such a blatant and obvious way that, you know, the comedy suffers or the creativity suffers.
Right.
So we definitely try to do a comedy-first approach or humor-first approach, where if it's not funny, it's not going to get published. It doesn't matter how good your point is.
Yeah.
You know, if you're this is just an op-ed in disguise, then any number of websites could do that.
Tons of those.
We'd rather be funny, you know. I mean, for me personally, I love doing the classic Christian jokes and church humor jokes, because that's my wheelhouse. That's my world. Making jokes about your own is always my favorite.
Absolutely.
You know, and some people will get upset and say, "Why do you make fun of Christians so much?" I'm like,
no,
"Because
keep it up.
we love Christians.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why."
Yeah. Well, and you know what? And it makes the Christian audience that's viewing or reading your content, it makes them stop and look on the inside to ask, is that true?
Right.
Is that really happening? I mean, honestly, you mentioned, or did you mention, or did we talk about it before going on the air about, yeah, you just did, about the Holy Spirit, the fog machine.
Yeah, right.
That kind of stuff. I mean, truly, it's like, oh, that's funny. Because look, in Christian ministry, we could get so caught up in the lighting and in the fog and in the stuff that we forget to stop and ask God to bless the service.
Yeah, you guys have a disappointing lack of fog here on this set.
I've noticed this.
Pretty tragic.
If we were only sensitive to the Holy Spirit, we would have had his fog here. Well, just the right amount of fog so he could move.
Well, that's the kind of prophetic or cutting edge of satire, is that it makes you laugh and then it makes you think. G.K. Chesterton once said that humor can get in under the door while seriousness is still fumbling at the handle. Wow. And that's like so accurate, you know. If you read an article that says, like, you know, 10 things you should be doing differently in your worship services, you know, you might already be on guard, or like, what are they saying is wrong with my worship services?
I love it.
You know, but if you write a joke that's just lighthearted, making fun of kind of something that we do in worship services, then people are willing to laugh at it and then think, oh, maybe there's something, maybe we are swinging too far that way or whatever.
So take us into the day in the life of being at the B. What happens?
Yeah, I mean, it's a super fun group of guys. You know, well, and that's the funny thing about all the fact checks and the censorship. And you know, one of the things the New York Times said was that we are a far right misinformation source, disguised as humor, disguised as satire, which is similar to what the CIA agent guy said. And it couldn't be further from the truth, because when you juxtapose that against what we do day to day, you know, we're guys that are sitting around in a circle in a very small office, which we're about to get a bigger one, but we're sitting around in a very small office just looking at each other like, well, what do you got today? What's funny? You know, what's making you laugh? You know, and we're making each other laugh. We're cracking jokes, and just looking for the ones that float to the surface, you know. And this kind of my job as the editor is to, like, you know, filter stuff out. You know, that's really funny, but we would get in trouble for telling that joke. You know, Calvary Chapel would be mad at us for telling that joke, so don't do that one.
Oh no, tell it. Tell it, please. It's got to be, I mean, do you guys ever, sitting around that circle, do you ever just say, you know what, that was such a bad, don't even try to come up with something like that again?
Well, I think a good rule for writing comedy and creativity is having your space where you pitch your ideas, having that be a safe space.
And they can.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
know we hate the term.
No, I know
safe
what you
space,
mean,
know
but you're right. It should
Yeah.
be like that.
You're not going to get canceled or lose your career
Right.
over a bad pitch or a pitch
Right.
that's too far. Let it loose.
Right on.
You can't write creativity. You can't write comedy from
You
a
mean
place
First
of fear.
Amendment kind of stuff?
Right, exactly.
Wow.
You can't write it from a place of fear. You have to write it from a place of boldness or just being true to what you're feeling. And that's, I mean, good comedy. What does everybody always say? Like, that joke is so true. And that's why. Is because you're writing something that's true to yourself. If you're writing something just to please an audience, or you're writing it because you're afraid, oh, we can't go too far this way or that way, then you're going to lose your edge. At the same time, as the editor, I have to then, I think there is a place for filtering and saying, does that go over the line this way or that way? And that's the editorial process. So that's more, I've got the pitches collected, and then I'm kind of filtering through or editing things, trimming off edges to kind of get what we want. We also shoot a lot of videos now. We're doing a lot of sketch comedy on YouTube and elsewhere, and we're doing podcasts and all that. So a good chunk of our week is writing stuff for that, and that's my favorite, is sitting down and writing a sketch. We sit down and write an idea.
Really?
And it's if you ever sat around with your friends and joked around, I mean, that's what the feel is for writing a sketch, because you're all throwing jokes in and ideas, and a lot of fun.
I was completely blown away, caught off surprise, just shocked actually to see that you guys had interviewed Elon Musk. I can't imagine how that even came together. I would first of all have to assume that he's a fan, which is an incredible honor to have Musk as a fan. But to get him into your, right, I assume you got him into your offices?
We actually flew out to a studio and had him meet us there, kind of closer to him. So it was a whirlwind. It was incredible. Yeah, he had interacted with our content on Twitter and such before, where he'd reply to a joke or laugh at a joke, share a Babylon Bee joke, that kind of stuff. So we knew that he was a fan. But our podcast, we typically will interview pastors or apologists, and just we kind of stay mostly in the Christian sphere, or comedians, stuff like that. And so Elon Musk was definitely out of our league for an interview, and we had an assistant podcast producer who, kind of without really running it by anyone, just started DMing people on Twitter asking if people would come on our podcast, and he kind of calls me in a frantically, Kyle, Elon Musk just replied to our Twitter DM. What do I do? And so he basically replied and said, fly out tomorrow and we'll do the interview, and just let me know where to meet you guys. Get a studio and let me know where to meet you guys. And so it was that quick, and we did it. It was out 2 days later. We had our podcast production team was working nonstop for 48 hours to do the post-production on that and get it out on the YouTube channel, and it was awesome. Just quite an incredible thing.
How did you find him to be? Everybody asks that question. Everybody wants to know. What's he like when the mic's off and the lights are off?
Oh, it was great. I mean, he was such a cool person that he came in and sat down, and we were all very nervous. Obviously, like, this is the biggest interview that we'll ever do.
I mean, it's.
We didn't feel worthy or deserving to be doing this, like, just there's other better qualified interviewers that could be doing this. And we sat down, and he just sat down. He almost started interviewing us. Like, he just sat down like, I love the Babylon Bee. How did you guys get started? And he was just asking us questions, and we're just kind of caught off guard trying to answer him. And then we kind of just flowed into the interview, and it was almost very informal. And we just let him talk, and such an interesting guy. Obviously very intelligent.
Yeah.
And just a wide range of topics, from humor and cancel culture and comedy to, we were asked him a very technical question about his rockets, and he went off for 10 minutes about it. And
about his toys.
Yeah, right.
Right. It's amazing.
Yeah, it was quite a cool thing. And then he was gracious enough to hang out with us for another hour or so after the cameras were off, and just wanted to talk about the Babylon Bee and him and the way culture's going, and it was very cool. We wish we'd left the cameras on.
Wow, isn't that true? So just personally, what do you think? He's South African, right?
Yeah.
But he lives here obviously now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And So where do you think he's at? Is he moving more center or right, or where's he at in his worldview of? I mean, I was gonna say poor guy, unfortunate guy in the. Sense that he's, he was their darling, the leftist darling for a long time, and then now he's asked people to use their own minds and think, and they hate him now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. He's probably, I can't speak for him necessarily, obviously, but he's probably moving slightly right, while Democrats are moving incredibly left. And so both of that makes it look like he's going far right or whatever, but he's
That's a good point.
It's the same thing with Bill Maher. If you watch him now, Bill Maher will go on there and say things that sound like, it's just normal things that people believed 5 years ago makes him seem like a far-right Nazi or whatever. That's like Bill Maher anyway. That's the stuff that the left will accuse him of, being this far-right guy now. And he's like, I'm just saying that boys are boys and girls are girls. Like,
right, right.
So there's probably some of that Overton window shifting with Musk. I think he is probably a classical liberal. Just that he does value free speech. That seems to be one of his big rallying cries is free speech and freedom. And and that puts him at odds with Democrats nowadays, sadly.
That's right. So you being the editor-in-chief, you've got to know funny when you see funny.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not just a title for you. You know what you're doing. Is this something that you just all your life, it's the way that God wired you, that you saw things funny? Is it something where there was a click maybe? Was it a movie? Was it an event where something just got the sparks and wheels flying?
Yeah, I always say I don't know if I was that funny growing up or whatever, but my family always says, "Oh yeah, you were the clown of the family." Like, don't you realize?
The entertainer, the class clown.
But I think I always had a dry sense of humor. Like I wasn't the over the top, like, oh, I'm the guy who's gonna throw a pie in his face or whatever. It was more dry commentary or just that wry wittiness. I love all the old Christopher Guest documentaries like the Spinal Tap and Mighty Wind and Best in Show. Those are the ones. Those are the ones that speak to me. Because you're finding this little subculture. And you're doing this very dry. Is this real? Is this a joke? I don't know what this is when you first watch those movies. So I've always loved that kind of humor, and that obviously fits very well with Babylon Bee. So yeah, when I saw the Babylon Bee posted on my Facebook feed the first day it launched, I looked at it and this is what I want to do. And I told my wife we had just moved into a new house and I was still working at the old sales job, and I said, I want to do this writing thing full time if it ever happens.
Right.
And she's been very supportive. She's like, well, if you want to quit and do it, do it. But she, in the back of her mind, was always like, how is this writing ever going to make money? Like writing these Christian jokes.
You can do all you want. Just pay the mortgage.
As long as you pay the bills. And God's been gracious in that area. So.
What are the setbacks? What makes it a hard day for you? What's a hard day?
Well, I mean, I find that as humans we can always find misery in any situation, no matter how good. Like it's so tempting to be discontented with your life. If you're a cashier or a sales guy or a banker or whatever, you can always find something that makes you depressed about your job.
That's true.
I mean, for us, it's the worst is the not being able to find the joke, not being able to find the right angle, the right thing. With comedy on the internet, it's especially difficult because you're not a stand-up comic where you can get that instant feedback and it fuels you, and you say something and you hear everybody laugh and you're like, okay, good, I'm on the right track. Right. So when I do like a speech somewhere, when I go give a presentation and read some Babylon Bee headlines, you get that, like the crowd loves it, and you can get that instant feedback. On the internet, it's difficult because you don't get that instant feedback. Maybe you get some likes or comments or shares, but that's so mechanical. It's just numbers. It doesn't show you the person who's texting it to their friend, and the group texts that go around, everybody tells me
You
about
know
where they're
it.
sharing Babylon Bee articles.
That's exactly what happens here.
Yeah, you don't see the pastors on Sunday who show a Babylon Bee headline at their congregation. Like, you don't get all that feedback. All you see is that number. So when there's things like suppression on Facebook or suppression on Twitter or whatever, you're not getting that feedback. You're like, oh, we're not getting the shares we want. That can make you go, oh, we're really not funny.
Wow.
So for 6 years, I've been saying, I'm not funny. I don't have any more jokes. And and then the next day, you always are hit with something to.
So like I've heard that comedians go through, certainly pro athletes go through a slump.
Sure.
How would you get out of a slump?
Yeah.
If that's true.
I mean, I think, like I was talking about Chesterton earlier with the chasing your hat thing, that's something that we constantly quote around the office. If there's a day where there's no jokes coming together or this, we say, well, it's just a chasing your hat day. We can be the idiots today, and we don't
Right.
always have to be the ones who are clever. And so I think we have to keep that in mind. And I have to just constantly slap myself and remind, not literally, but I have to constantly slap myself and remind myself, like, you tell jokes on the internet for a living. You got it easy,
Yeah,
It's the Israelites in the desert, when they get rescued from Pharaoh, and then it's like, oh, we should have gone back there. I'm like, I always have to remember, like, oh, well, you were sitting at a sales job working 80 hours a week, hating your life, 4 or 5 years ago. So,
So true.
you have to try to be content in that and remember, keep things in perspective. I mean, and even where we are in human history, just
Yep.
that, we wrote a Babylon Bee headline once that was like, I'm bored, says kid who has more things than royalty had 100 years ago, and there's a kid sitting there with all his video game consoles, and but that's me too. Is like I sit there and go,
Exactly.
life is hard, and I'm like, well, 100 years ago I would have been farming my own food, and
Right.
it's
Exactly right.
it's so hard or it's so easy to forget like where we are in human history and how content that should make us.
Do you see funny in just things naturally, though? I mean, like you guys have to sit down in an office, so to speak, and put things together. But are you not just, because it's such a part of who we are as created in the image of God, that aren't you just kind of always on the funny note, so to speak? Not being funny, because that could be obnoxious.
Sure.
But what I'm saying is, like, you just saw that, yesterday I saw a squirrel fall out of a tree. I thought that was incredibly hilarious, especially when the squirrel was okay, then it was even more funny. But, those kinds of things. Are you just, do you see things? Because 100 people can look at something, but you look at the exact same thing, I would assume, and you see it just a little different.
Well, my wife's constantly having to hit the back of my head because I'm writing headlines in church, like I'm watching what's happening and just writing
That's
something
awesome.
down. And
That is great.
We're going to a Calvary Chapel right now, so there's a ton of content.
Great content.
Yeah.
At a Calvary, a lot of stuff
right.
to make fun of. That's
So
awesome.
you have, but I think that's a good habit to cultivate for anybody. Not the writing during church, but the finding humor
you're
and
taking notes.
taking notes. That's what it is.
Of course you are.
In my own way.
That's right. That's right. Did you say you had kids?
Yeah. 3 boys.
Ages?
Yeah, they're 13, 11, and actually 12. One just turned 12. 13, 12, and 6.
What with the older ones anyway? What becomes of their friends when they say, or they find out, my dad writes for the Babylon Bee?
Yeah. My eldest is very embarrassed because he's a shy kid, and I go to pick him up at the junior high, and all his friends know the Babylon Bee, and they're like, I watched your show today. I watched your podcast. So they go to a Christian school, so they're all in on it. My middle son more likes it. It's his claim to fame. So
There you go.
yeah.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So you personally, what's been your faith journey with Jesus? How did this happen to you? Where did that all begin?
Yeah, I grew up in a Christian home up here at PFB, a Purpose Church now, for for the first 18 years I went there in my life, and then I got baptized for my freshman year of high school there, and that was kind of the moment that I had grown up in the church, and it's so easy in the church to find to kind of become that self-righteous guy who's I was the guy with all the Awana trophies and very proud of myself.
Yeah.
And I think that was when I realized I don't know, a lot of people that come to faith later in life have to repent of all the worldliness and move to the church. I felt like in a lot of ways I had to repent from the idols in the church to find Christ.
Sure, yeah,
there,
I see that.
And so that was kind of the journey where I came to know the Lord, and then from there it was just growth and Bible study. I had a great youth pastor who taught the Word of God very strongly from the pulpit in the youth center there, and so I really learned to love the Bible and take it seriously in a that was the first time I had heard real hardcore through the books of the Bible expositional preaching. Being able to hear like we're going to preach through the book of Galatians.
Yes.
Was like this. Wow, this is incredible. And I got to hear that for the first time. So that and then I bounced around at various different churches. Like I said, that gives a lot of material for the Babylon Bee. Doing different church plants and different denominations through the years, and it gives you a lot of material.
It's incredible. It's so good. This is one reporter's opinion, is that as I look at what you put out, being a pastor and in the Word, I'm always encouraged by how solid you guys are in your humor. And I don't mean solid like not funny. I mean solid funny, where what you're talking about is a biblical issue or truth that has its answer. And we, the believers, can tell when we're reading it or saying it, this guy knows what he's talking about. These guys know. And, I've never gone on the Babylon Bee to, Wikipedia you guys, or to see what your statement of faith is if it's out there. It comes across. It's clear. God's using it. It's remarkable. We love it. In the closing moments, what do you see the future of the Babylon Bee becoming?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've had a lot of irons in the fire for a lot of years. It's a small but growing company where we're in this kind of act 2, if you will, of the company growth phase now, where it's like you're moving from a couple guys in a garage to now we have people that are working on. I mean, you wouldn't believe the Babylon Bee. If I told you that 2 or 3 years ago I was the only employee, and we were still, we had other writers that were contributing part-time or throwing in headlines or whatever. But if there were, on a given day, we might have published 8 articles, and I might have pitched. Written and photoshopped every single one, that was and so now we're kind of getting to a more sustainable level where we have photoshoppers that I can go to. We have people that are writing articles that I can go to. I have a great managing editor that can run some of the day-to-day. So that's kind of the trajectory, is like we're building this out, and we've looked at a lot of things like film projects and TV projects. Our video content on YouTube has been taken off, being able to turn a lot of the Babylon Bee style headlines into a full-on sketch, 3 or 4 minutes of really building out that joke. It's been a lot of fun. We're looking at what it would mean to do something like Saturday Night Live from the perspective of the Babylon Bee.
Incredible.
Ways that we can impact culture. We say that the Babylon Bee speaks truth to a culture that no longer believes in truth. And we're just looking for ways to do that, different formats. How do we go where the culture is and bring that message in a way that humor first, and then that message comes and punches people right afterwards.
Wow, what you just said is a modern day version of the whole concept of a parable. A parable, a parabolic teaching, is ancient, and it is something that theologians understand that it's God that invented parabolic teaching. When we read about the parables in the Bible, they're not only localized to Jesus, there's parables in the Old Testament. But when Jesus taught a parable, that's what we see often recorded. What we don't realize is that in the Jewish way of preaching and teaching, the teacher had been teaching for an hour or two, in this case, rabbi, teacher, Jesus, and when he delivers the parable, it is taking the message that he just gave you and they put a bow on it with a memorable, colorful description. And so parabolic is para, alongside, cast, to cast truth alongside your head. And that's exactly what you guys are doing. You are wrapping up truth to be dropped alongside a head that wouldn't normally even consider it, because it's that satire funny. It's extremely effective, obviously, which is why you guys are being so attacked, because that's evidence of your effectiveness. And yet at the same time, we don't want you guys to ever get, right, so serious about your success. We want you guys to keep doing what you're doing. You guys are an incredible form of release for us, and we love it. And the world loves it.
One of the things Babylon Bee has been doing a lot of is books. We have the Sacred Texts of the Babylon Bee, which is our best of collection. That's awesome and beautiful, and it looks like a giant Bible on your shelf. We have the Babylon Bee Guide to Wokeness, where we destroy wokeness and all of its forms. We have How to Be a Perfect Christian, where we mock church culture. And then me and the managing editor of the Babylon Bee, Joel Berry, just had a novel that's coming out on June 7th. I don't know when this airs, but yeah, and it's called The Postmodern Pilgrim's Progress. And we take John Bunyan's classic Pilgrim's Progress, put a sci-fi and a humor twist into it. And we have a kind of a guy who's a little bit of an agnostic, doesn't really know what's going on, and he kind of goes through this journey where he meets God through these encounters of woke people and people in the charlatans in the church and this and that, and so we took that structure that Bunyan did so well, of Mr. Worldly Wise Man and all these characters that we all encounter, and you'll read the book and look at the people and go, I know that guy at church, or I know that guy in the world.
My gosh, that's great.
So that's been a lot of fun, and the response has been great from people who have taken a look so far.
Fantastic. So sometime around June 7th-ish?
June 7th is the release.
Is the release going to be available Amazon everywhere?
Amazon and non-woke places as well.
Exactly. Publisher is?
Salem Books.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Kyle, keep it up. Don't stop. We love you guys. And we so appreciate you taking the time to be with us. And we actually wanted you to be here just so that we could get closer to the Babylon Bee. So thank you, brother.
Well, thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
God bless you. Yeah. Our pleasure.